You let the human babysit an apex predator. Now it calls him Dad. Evan Reyes never imagined that his Monday morning would begin with a direct order to babysit an apex predator. Not that he had much experience with any creature beyond the occasional office plant or his neighbor's robotic cat. Yet there he was, standing in the wide glass corridor of the Galactic Coalition Research Station, blinking at a message projected in midair above the docking bay. Temporary assignment, Zalathi Juvenile, under your supervision. Begin immediately. The message flickered once, twice, and disappeared. Evan pinched the bridge of his nose. The Galactic Coalition had many regulations, many rules, and apparently a terrible sense of humor. He had been transferred from logistics to creature supervision for the day because the scheduled handler had mysteriously fallen ill, leaving a gap in the rotation. And now Evan was the gap. He glanced down at the elevator panel, noting the red warning light indicating the secure habitat below. Secure, it read, though he wasn't sure if that meant it was secure for him or if he was supposed to keep the predator secure. Either way, it didn't sound promising. As the elevator descended, Evan tried to mentally prepare himself. He reminded himself of the human survival tips he had read in an old interspecies guidebook. Do not startle, do not dominate, speak softly. Establish trust. All sensible advice, but Evan had a nagging suspicion that none of it actually applied to a creature that could, theoretically, tear the station apart if it grew up too quickly. The doors opened into a wide observation room, glass panels lining one wall, giving a full view of the predator's habitat. The space was massive, carefully designed to mimic a Zalathi juvenile's home planet environment. Bioluminescent plants pulsed faintly, and a small waterfall trickled into a shallow pool. For a moment, the beauty of the enclosure distracted Evan from the terror of his assignment. Then he saw it. The young Zalathi sat near the water, its large, round eyes reflecting the soft glow of the bioluminescent plants. Its skin shimmered in shades of green and silver, and its limbs were long but delicate. It looked harmless, adorable even. The creature tilted its head, ears twitching slightly as it observed Evan. Evan blinked. Okay, he said aloud, that's terrifyingly cute. A voice crackled in his earpiece. Reminder, human, do not engage physically unless necessary. This is an apex predator classified level 5. Behavior is unpredictable. Evan swallowed. Right, apex predator, totally normal, harmless, adorable, got it. He stepped closer to the enclosure, carefully following the walking path laid out for visitors. The youngling did not move. It simply studied him with a curious tilt of its head. Evan crouched slightly, trying to seem non-threatening. Hey there, he said softly. I'm Evan. I'm your temporary babysitter. The predator's eyes widened, and it tilted its head even further. It was almost as if it understood him. Evan choked back a laugh. That's a good sign, right? A small alarm beeped from the control panel, and a soft voice spoke again. Human, do not underestimate. Zalathi juveniles possess high intelligence and adaptive behavior. They will learn quickly. Exercise caution. Evan nodded, ignoring the warning. He had a feeling that exercise caution was meant for anyone who wasn't human. Humans, apparently, were reckless optimists. He spent the next hour reading the care instructions posted on the glass. Diet, exercise, enrichment, communication, every detail meticulously outlined. Evan scribbled notes furiously, occasionally muttering to himself. So, it likes puzzles, okay? Likes music, check. Wait, it likes storytelling. I'm about to tell bedtime stories to a potential planet-level predator. He felt his pulse quicken at the thought, but there was no time to overthink it. A soft, hiss-like sound drew his attention. The youngling had padded closer to the glass, watching him with interest. Its eyes were wide, innocent, but there was a spark of awareness that made Evan take a careful step back. Don't worry, he said. I'm not going to hurt you, I promise. The creature tilted its head again. And then, almost imperceptibly, it leaned forward, pressing one small paw against the glass. Evan froze. It was like a toddler reaching out to touch someone for the first time. His heart melted a little. Okay, he whispered. I think we're off to a good start. For the next few hours, Evan settled into a routine. He set up puzzles for the youngling to manipulate, played soft harmonic tones on a small speaker, and even read aloud from a short storybook he found in the station library. To his surprise, the creature followed along attentively, tilting its head at the illustrations, mimicking gestures, and occasionally chattering in soft, melodic sounds. Evan laughed quietly to himself. This is actually fun. Kind of like babysitting a very smart, very squishy alien. Hours passed with minimal incident. Every so often, a senior researcher would peek through the observation glass, whispering exclamations of disbelief. How is the human still alive? Or it's obeying him without fear. Evan waved awkwardly each time. I have no idea, I'm just being nice. By mid-afternoon, he noticed the creature trying something new. It was mimicking his posture, crouching low and stretching its limbs, copying his every movement. Evan raised his hands, and the youngling raised its tiny paws in response. He clapped once softly. It clapped back. Oh no, he muttered. I think it's learning me, I think it's copying me. A small alert ping sounded on his wrist. A holographic screen projected the official containment protocols. Reminder, imprinting on Zalathi juveniles may alter future aggression responses. Proceed with extreme caution. Evan sighed. Right, extreme caution, got it. He glanced at the youngling, who now seemed to be smiling, or at least the closest equivalent in its species. You know, you're going to be massive one day, Evan said softly. But right now, you're just my little buddy. Don't tell anyone, but I think I kind of like this job. The youngling tilted its head and made a series of chirps, as if acknowledging him. Evan chuckled. I'll take that as a yes. Later, during a routine feeding, Evan discovered another unexpected trait. The Zalathi youngling preferred to eat only when he encouraged it, refusing food if left alone. Evan carefully held the small dish, coaxing the creature gently, and it took the food from him delicately, almost tenderly. He realized with some alarm that he was forming an attachment. A strong attachment, one that the protocol warned against. Humans were known for forming bonds easily, and apparently he was no exception. By evening, the station corridors had quieted. Evan sat cross-legged on the observation floor, the youngling nestled near him, humming softly. It had started following his every movement, mimicking his breathing and posture, responding to his tone and rhythm. It seemed content, even happy. Evan smiled and scratched his head. I guess this is my life now, babysitting a future apex predator. How did I even get here? From the control room, a voice muttered in disbelief. Human is still alive, and the juvenile appears to be calm. Evan shrugged, trying to act nonchalant. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just being human. And for the first time since he arrived, Evan realized that perhaps being human, the messy, emotional, unpredictable species he came from, was exactly what the youngling needed. Not dominance, not fear, not aggression. Just a simple, steady presence. As night fell over the station, the lights dimmed softly in the Zalathi habitat. Evan and the creature sat together quietly, a perfect tableau of trust forming between species. Somewhere deep in his mind, Evan felt a spark of something extraordinary. The beginnings of a bond that could reshape not only the youngling's future, but perhaps the galaxy's understanding of what humans were capable of. He yawned, stretched, and whispered, All right, little buddy, tomorrow we try more puzzles, and maybe a story about a hero who didn't have to fight to win. The youngling chirped softly, nuzzling against him. Evan smiled and rested his hand gently on its shimmering back. Somewhere in those glowing eyes, he thought he saw recognition, gratitude, and perhaps even affection. For a human with no experience in dealing with predators, it was terrifying. For a human with a heart, it was magical. And Evan Reyes, babysitter of the galaxy's most dangerous species, leaned back and laughed softly to himself. Somehow, someway, he was going to survive this. The next morning, Evan arrived at the Zalathi enclosure with a mix of dread and excitement. He wasn't sure if he was coming back to the same adorable creature from yesterday, or if he would be greeted by a miniature whirlwind of chaos. Judging by the chirps he heard before the glass doors slid open, it seemed that the youngling had been awake for some time, possibly waiting for him. Morning, little buddy, Evan said softly, stepping inside the observation path. The young Zalathi immediately bounded forward, not with fear, but with an unsteady, eager energy, as if it had something important to show him. Its large eyes sparkled, reflecting the soft light of the enclosure. Evan knelt down and held out his hand. The creature touched it gently, then drew back, tilting its head and letting out a series of melodic chirps. Did you miss me? He asked with a chuckle. The youngling tilted its head as though considering the question, then nudged his hand again. Evan shook his head in mock defeat. I guess that counts as a yes. He pulled out a set of enrichment toys from a small storage compartment. Puzzles, soft manipulatives, and sensory objects filled the tray. "All right, let's see if your brain is as sharp as your claws someday," he joked, placing the items on the floor. The youngling approached cautiously at first, then suddenly swiped a small puzzle with its paw, tilting it in the air to examine the patterns. Evan watched closely. Its movements were deliberate, intelligent, and sometimes surprisingly inventive. The Zalathi solved the simpler parts quickly, pausing and looking at Evan as if to ask for guidance. "Okay, that's impressive," Evan said, genuinely amazed. "I didn't think you'd figure it out this fast. You're smart." The creature chirped and tapped its paw on the puzzle again, clearly proud of itself. Evan laughed. "Pride in your work, huh? Good lesson for today. Always be proud of your victories, no matter the size." Evan noticed that the youngling would occasionally stop and imitate his gestures. If he waved his hand, the youngling waved its paw. If he crouched low, it mirrored him. Each time, Evan felt a little thrill of pride mixed with unease. He was forming a bond, but he wasn't entirely sure how strong it could become, or if it was wise. Later, it was time for a feeding. Evan had read carefully about the creature's diet. High-protein, carefully measured portions, served in a way that encouraged engagement. He approached with a tray, kneeling at the edge of the shallow pool. "Okay, here's lunch, and remember, no rushing," he said gently. The youngling hesitated, sniffing at the food, then looked up at Evan. Slowly, it reached out and accepted the meal from his hands. Evan smiled. "See, cooperation is easier than domination, always easier." He spent the rest of the morning introducing new exercises, soft tug-of-war games with special ropes, mild obstacle courses, and even a short song he hummed. The creature listened intently and surprisingly began to hum along in its own chirping rhythm. Evan was astounded. "You're singing? I didn't know you could sing." The creature chirped again, clearly happy with its new accomplishment. Evan felt a warmth he had never expected. Babysitting an apex predator had turned into something far more rewarding and far stranger than he could have imagined. By midday, the station's other personnel began watching through the observation windows. Whispers of disbelief floated through the air. "How is he still alive?" one researcher muttered. "And why does the Zalathi seem calm?" Evan caught sight of them and gave a sheepish wave. "Hi, it's just bonding, nothing dangerous happening here." A small alarm beeped in the corner of his vision. The AI assistant's calm voice spoke. "Human, the juvenile is displaying behaviors not previously observed. Emotional attachment appears to be forming. Monitoring advised." Evan shrugged. "Monitoring, sure, but it's fine. We're just friends." By afternoon, the youngling had started initiating interaction in ways Evan had never expected. It followed him around the enclosure, nudged him when it wanted attention, and occasionally pressed its forehead against his chest in a gesture that felt almost human. Evan blinked. "Okay, you are adorable, and I think I might be in trouble. This is like a toddler already thinking I'm their parent." He tried to maintain a professional demeanor, but the truth was, he was enjoying every moment. He taught the youngling simple hand signals, playful gestures, and even basic tricks like rolling over and tapping objects. Each success was met with chirps and expressive movements. Evan realized that in trying to follow the protocol, he was unintentionally inventing a new method of care. The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter, soft humming, and playful training. Evan paused occasionally to jot notes on the behaviors he was seeing. His observations might one day be valuable for Zalathi research, if anyone could convince the coalition that bonding with a human was safe. As the day drew on, Evan noticed the youngling becoming more independent, yet still looking to him for reassurance. It explored corners of the enclosure, inspected new objects, and attempted to mimic Evan's posture without being prompted. "You're growing fast," he murmured. "Too fast, maybe, but I think we can handle it together." Just as he was beginning to relax, a sharp chime echoed from the station intercom. A senior scientist's voice spoke urgently. "Evan, report immediately to the observation deck. You need to explain why the juvenile is displaying unprecedented calm and attachment to a human." Evan sighed and nodded, brushing imaginary dust off his uniform. "Unprecedented calm, huh? That's one way to put it." He guided the youngling toward the observation doors, but it stopped halfway, staring at him. Evan crouched. "Don't worry, buddy. I'll be right back, I promise." The creature seemed to understand. It followed him obediently, keeping close without showing fear. Evan opened the doors and stepped onto the observation deck, the youngling trailing just behind. "The senior scientist, Doctor." Alvani, a tall, blue-skinned alien with sharp eyes, crossed her arms and stared. "Explain this," she demanded. "Why is the Zalathi so calm? Why is it interacting with you? This is not standard behavior." Evan raised his hands, trying to appear confident. "I don't know exactly. I think it likes me. We're bonding." Dr. Alvani's eyes narrowed. "Bonding? You are a human. They are dangerous. You should not be forming attachments." "I think it's working," Evan said simply. "It's happy, calm, it's learning." The scientist's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at her colleagues, who whispered among themselves, clearly astonished. This may be unprecedented," she admitted. "The human seems to be having a positive effect." Evan shrugged, trying to hide his surprise. "I'm just being myself, that's all." The Zalathi youngling, curious about the discussion, padded closer to Evan, pressing gently against his leg. Evan smiled down at it. "See, even you agree everything's fine." The day continued with more tests and observations. Evan guided the youngling through obstacle courses, mental challenges, and enrichment exercises, all while maintaining a calm, friendly presence. Each time the creature succeeded, it chirped and nudged him in a way that clearly communicated pride and happiness. Evan laughed quietly. "You're smarter than anyone thought, and also more affectionate." By evening, Evan and the youngling were sitting together near the small waterfall, watching the bioluminescent plants glow softly. Evan had never felt more content. The youngling rested its head on his knee, eyes half closed, occasionally chirping in a soft, rhythmic pattern. Evan ran a hand over its shimmering back. "I don't know if anyone else understands this, but I think we're making progress. You're not just a predator. You're my buddy, my little friend." The youngling tilted its head and looked at him almost as if it understood. Evan chuckled. "You're lucky you're cute, otherwise this would be terrifying." Somewhere deep in the station, the AI assistant recorded every behavior, every interaction. Observers took notes, astonished at the results. The young Zalathi was calm, engaged, and showing signs of trust that were previously thought impossible with apex predators. Evan leaned back and exhaled, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. Babysitting an apex predator was not easy. It was unpredictable, exhausting, and occasionally nerve-wracking. But it was also full of moments of joy, discovery, and connection unlike anything he had ever experienced. As the lights dimmed in the enclosure for the night cycle, the youngling nestled closer to Evan, who quietly hummed a tune. He realized that the bond they were forming was more than just caretaker and juvenile. It was a partnership built on trust, patience, and simple kindness. Evan smiled to himself. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we'll try more puzzles, more games, maybe even some storytelling. And you'll keep teaching me how to be a better human." The youngling chirped softly in response, and Evan felt a warmth in his chest. For all the chaos, all the uncertainty, and all the warnings about humans being fragile, this moment was perfect. He was surviving. He was thriving, and somehow, against all odds, he was bonding with the galaxy's most dangerous creature, without a single violent incident. And somewhere deep in that tiny, shimmering chest, the Zalathi youngling seemed to understand something important. Humans were strange, unpredictable, and emotional, but they could also be gentle, caring, and just the right kind of friend. Evan Reyes, babysitter extraordinaire, laughed quietly to himself, realizing that this was only the beginning. Evan arrived early the next morning, still half asleep, and already the Zalathi youngling was waiting at the edge of the enclosure. It had apparently remembered the time schedule perfectly and padded toward him with a quiet urgency. Evan rubbed his eyes, stifling a yawn. "Wow, you're punctual. I barely managed that with humans." The youngling chirped, bouncing lightly on its paws. Evan chuckled. "I guess we're both learning new things about each other. You learn routines, I learned patience." He picked up a small tray of enrichment items. Today, he had something new planned, a series of puzzles designed to stimulate problem-solving and memory. Each puzzle was simple but required attention and careful observation. Evan set them out in a semicircle. The youngling immediately approached the first puzzle, sniffing at the pieces with intense curiosity. "You know," Evan said softly, kneeling, "some humans would never get through one of these without help. I think you might beat me at this." The creature chirped and tapped a piece into place. It looked up at Evan with what seemed like pride. Evan laughed. "Okay, that's impressive, but don't get cocky. We still have 4 more puzzles to go." As the morning progressed, Evan noticed something extraordinary. The youngling was not only solving puzzles faster than expected, but it was also starting to anticipate his intentions. If Evan reached for a piece, the creature would place it in the correct spot even before he could guide it. Evan's jaw dropped slightly. "Wait, are you trying to help me now?" The youngling chirped affirmatively and nudged his hand. Evan shook his head in disbelief. "You're brilliant. I think we might have invented teamwork." The observation windows along the corridor had filled again. Station personnel whispered and gestured, watching through the glass. "It's responding to him voluntarily," one researcher said. "This is unusual." Evan waved awkwardly. "Yeah, it's called friendship." Later, during feeding, Evan discovered another new behavior. The youngling had begun to anticipate what he wanted before he even asked. If he reached for the feeding tray, it moved to the correct position to receive its portion. If he hummed a soft tune, it would settle down, chirping gently in rhythm. Evan's mind raced. "Okay, you're learning human cues faster than any predicted model. I think you're actually calling me Dad, but in your own way." The youngling tilted its head at him and made a low, melodic chirp. Evan laughed nervously. "Yep, I was right. You just called me Dad," or something like it. "How did this happen?" The AI assistant's calm voice interrupted from the control panel. "Human, juvenile is displaying attachment behaviors typically observed only in highly social species. Term Dad inferred from vocal pattern recognition. Continued observation recommended." Evan ran a hand through his hair. "Great! Not only am I babysitting a future apex predator, but apparently I'm already considered parental material." Throughout the afternoon, Evan focused on training and engagement, using storytelling as a new tool. He read from a book he had found in the station library, a simple tale of a hero who solved problems with kindness rather than violence. The youngling sat attentively, occasionally tilting its head or mimicking gestures. Evan smiled. "See, even you understand the point. Sometimes brains are better than claws." The youngling let out a soft chirp and padded closer to Evan, resting its small head on his lap. He froze for a moment. "Okay, that's new. That's definitely new." The station scientists were stunned. One muttered, "Attachment behavior is progressing faster than models predicted. Human is influencing juvenile positively." Another whispered, "He's teaching it to trust." Evan was oblivious to the debate happening behind the glass. He gently stroked the shimmering skin along the youngling's back. "You're calm, you're happy, you're learning, and I think you like me just a little, right?" The youngling chirped in response, pressing closer. Evan laughed quietly. "Yeah, okay, I'm officially a parent now. Congratulations to me." As the day went on, Evan introduced more advanced challenges. He set up small obstacles and encouraged the youngling to navigate through them. At first, it hesitated, looking to Evan for guidance. But slowly it began to attempt solutions independently, occasionally looking back for affirmation. Evan realized that the youngling was not just following instructions. It was learning, observing, and even improvising. "You're amazing," Evan said, gently clapping his hands. "I think we're going to be a great team. You just might be smarter than most humans I know." The youngling responded with a series of chirps that sounded like laughter. Evan laughed back, feeling a deep warmth in his chest. The bond they were forming was undeniable, and it went beyond caretaker and juvenile. It was a partnership built on trust, learning, and affection. Later, Evan noticed something that made him pause. The youngling had begun imitating more subtle behaviors, tilting its head when he tilted his own, pausing when he paused, and even following his gaze. Evan realized that the creature was not just learning from him. It was observing him, understanding him, and responding to his actions in a way that suggested a deep level of intelligence and empathy. "This is incredible," Evan whispered. "You're not just learning skills. You're learning to communicate with me." The observation team outside continued to murmur in astonishment. "This is unprecedented," one researcher said. "Human influence is creating a behavioral change in an apex predator. This could rewrite containment protocols entirely." Evan, unaware of the full implications, continued his day with the youngling. They played, explored, and practiced new behaviors. The youngling's confidence grew, but it never strayed far from Evan. It looked to him for reassurance, guidance, and approval, and Evan responded with gentle encouragement. As evening approached, Evan and the youngling sat together near the waterfall. The soft glow of the bioluminescent plants reflected off their figures. Evan hummed a quiet tune, and the youngling chirped along, a harmonious duet of human and Zalathi. You know, Evan said softly, I never expected to enjoy this. Babysitting a predator sounded scary, but you make it wonderful. The youngling pressed its small head against him, and Evan felt a surge of affection he had never experienced before. I think we're going to be okay, he whispered. We're going to survive this, together. Somewhere deep in the station, the AI continued monitoring. Every movement, every chirp, every gesture was recorded and analyzed. The results were astonishing: calmness, attachment, cooperation, and accelerated learning. Evan had unintentionally achieved something the scientists had never predicted. As night settled over the station, Evan realized that the youngling's bond with him was more than just a curiosity. It was a demonstration of humanity's unique ability to connect, nurture, and inspire trust. And in that moment, he felt a profound sense of purpose. Evan leaned back against the soft rocks of the enclosure, the youngling curled up beside him. He closed his eyes and smiled. Tomorrow, he whispered, we'll try more games, more puzzles, and maybe you'll teach me something new too. The youngling chirped softly, as if in agreement, and for the first time, Evan truly felt like he wasn't just babysitting a future apex predator. He was shaping a future companion, a friend, and perhaps even a little kid of his own. Evan chuckled quietly. Dad. That's what they'll probably call me someday. Dad. How did that happen so fast? The creature made a soft, melodic chirp in response, pressing gently against him. Evan laughed softly. Yeah, okay, you win. I'm your dad now. Happy, good. Let's see what tomorrow brings, little buddy. And with that, the two settled into a calm, peaceful rhythm. The youngling had grown, learned, and adapted, and Evan had discovered a new side of humanity he hadn't known existed: the ability to nurture, to teach, and to form a bond that transcended species. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, and neither of them would ever be the same. The next morning, Evan arrived at the station with a sense of anticipation. The youngling had changed overnight, or at least, that was how it felt to him. It seemed more confident, more aware, and somehow a little mischievous. He stepped into the enclosure and was immediately met with a soft, melodic chirp that sounded almost like laughter. Morning, little buddy, he said, bending down. I see someone's ready to start the day. The youngling bounded toward him, then suddenly darted past, making a small loop around the enclosure before stopping and glancing back. Evan laughed. Okay, you're fast. I see you've got energy today. He pulled out the tray of enrichment toys and puzzles, but before he could even place them down, the youngling had already begun exploring. It was touching everything, sniffing objects, testing them in ways that made Evan's jaw drop. It seemed to have learned how to anticipate what he wanted it to do without his guidance. You're independent now, Evan said softly, a mix of awe and slight worry in his voice. I think you might be too clever for your own good. The youngling chirped again, then tapped one of the puzzle pieces into place. Evan stared. Wait, you solved that before I even showed you. You're not just learning, you're thinking ahead. Outside the glass, station personnel gathered once more, whispering and pointing. One researcher muttered, it's adapting faster than projected. That human is influencing it in ways we didn't anticipate. Another replied, it's responding to care, not control. That's unprecedented. Evan, oblivious to the discussion, tried to keep the youngling engaged. He set up a series of gentle obstacle courses, using soft barriers and lightweight objects. The creature navigated the obstacles with skill and precision, stopping occasionally to look back at Evan, as if to make sure he was watching. You're showing off now, Evan said with a grin. I see how it is, trying to impress your dad. The youngling tilted its head and made a chirping sound, then patted his hand. Evan laughed. Okay, yes, you're adorable, but don't get used to bossing me around just yet. Feeding time came next. Evan had carefully prepared the portioned meals and carried them to the enclosure. The youngling approached, sniffed the food, then glanced at him expectantly. Evan smiled. You're learning routines quickly. I'm impressed. But remember, manners matter even for apex predators. The creature took the food gently from his hands, eating slowly and deliberately. Evan watched, amazed. See? Respectful eating, good behavior, you're learning everything faster than I imagined. As the day went on, the youngling's independence became more apparent. It began exploring corners of the enclosure without guidance, climbing small rocks, investigating the waterfall, and even testing the small interactive toys on its own. Evan followed carefully, ensuring safety while letting it discover. You're growing fast, he murmured, And not just physically, mentally too. You're learning how to think, how to explore, how to be you. The observation team outside was in quiet awe. Human influence seems to be nurturing intelligence, curiosity, and calm behavior in a species previously thought uncontrollable at this stage, one scientist noted. Another added, "We may need to revise containment and care protocols for juveniles entirely." Meanwhile, Evan was completely focused on the youngling. He encouraged it to solve a series of puzzles he had never tried before, testing its memory and problem-solving skills. The creature approached each challenge thoughtfully, sometimes pausing to glance at Evan for approval before completing it. "You're teaching me patience, too," Evan said softly, smiling. "I think we're both learning from each other." After a while, the youngling suddenly darted to the edge of the enclosure, chirping loudly and hopping in place. Evan frowned. "What is it now? Did you find something interesting?" The creature ran toward a small hidden area, then returned with a soft, glowing stone it had found in a corner. It dropped the stone in front of Evan, chirping proudly. Evan laughed, picking it up. "You're showing me gifts now? Is that how it works?" "First puzzles, then meals, and now gifts." The youngling chirped again and nudged his hand, clearly pleased with his reaction. Evan shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe this. You're thoughtful. You're actually thinking about making me happy." The day continued with games, exploration, and laughter. Evan realized that the youngling was no longer just responding to him. It was initiating interactions, testing its environment, and experimenting with behaviors in ways that suggested intelligence, empathy, and creativity. "You're amazing," he said, crouching beside it. "I don't think anyone else could manage this, little buddy. You're incredible." Later, Evan tried something new, storytelling. He pulled out a book from the library with simple illustrations and began reading aloud. The youngling listened intently, occasionally tilting its head or chirping in response to certain events. Evan narrated slowly, emphasizing emotions, choices, and consequences. "You see," he said softly, "sometimes being kind is stronger than being aggressive. Sometimes thinking is better than fighting, and sometimes you just need a friend to guide you." The youngling responded with a melodic chirp and nudged him gently. Evan smiled. "Yes, you understand, that's right. You're learning and teaching me at the same time." Afternoon arrived, and the youngling began showing more surprising behaviors. It mimicked small gestures that Evan hadn't taught it, like raising a paw in greeting, tilting its head thoughtfully, or making rhythmic chirps in response to his humming. It seemed to have its own way of communicating, inventing behaviors that were not in any care protocol. "You're improvising," Evan said softly, a mixture of pride and amazement in his voice. "You're not just learning, you're creating. That's genius." The observation team outside was taking notes furiously. "We've never seen anything like this," one researcher whispered. "The juvenile is initiating complex social behaviors and responding to care instead of fear. This is revolutionary." Evan again remained blissfully unaware of the full implications. He continued engaging with the youngling, laughing at its playful antics, celebrating its successes, and gently guiding it through new challenges. As the day wore on, Evan noticed something that made his heart swell. The youngling had begun seeking him out when it faced a challenge. If it hesitated at a puzzle or obstacle, it would look at him for reassurance before proceeding. If it wanted to play, it would bring a toy to him, and when it was unsure, it would nuzzle against him softly. "You're calling me your dad," Evan whispered, chuckling nervously. "I think you actually understand the word now, and I kind of like it." The youngling chirped in response and pressed closer, as if confirming his observation. Evan laughed softly. Okay, I'm officially dad, got it. That's our new rule." By evening, the two were resting near the small waterfall in the enclosure. The soft glow of the bioluminescent plants reflected off their figures, casting a peaceful aura. Evan hummed a gentle tune, and the youngling chirped along, creating a harmony of sound and companionship. "You know," Evan said softly, "this is incredible. I never thought I'd spend my days babysitting a predator, but this is something special. You're not just a creature I care for, you're a friend, a family, my little buddy, my kid." The youngling nudged him with its head, and Evan smiled, stroking its shimmering back. "We're learning together, growing together, and honestly, I wouldn't trade this for anything." Somewhere deep in the station, the AI assistant continued to record every behavior. Every interaction, every chirp, every gesture was documented. Analysts outside marveled at the results. Calmness, trust, creativity, and attachment, all triggered by the gentle care and guidance of one human. Evan leaned back against the soft rocks near the waterfall, the youngling curled up beside him. He closed his eyes, smiling. Tomorrow we'll have more games, more puzzles, maybe more stories, and I'll bet you'll teach me something new again. The youngling chirped softly in agreement, pressing against him. Evan laughed quietly. Yes, yes, Dad it is. You're definitely calling me Dad now, and I think that's the best title I've ever had. As night settled over the station, a gentle peace filled the enclosure. The youngling had grown, learned, and begun to thrive, and Evan had discovered a new depth of humanity he hadn't known existed. The bond between them was no longer one-sided. It was a partnership, a family, and a friendship built on trust, patience, and affection. And in that moment, Evan knew something profound. Sometimes the strongest influence in the galaxy isn't force or power. Sometimes it's kindness, sometimes it's patience, and sometimes it's the simple act of being a parent. He smiled to himself, glancing at the small, shimmering figure curled beside him. We're going to be okay. You and me, we've got this, together. The youngling chirped softly, resting its head on his lap. Evan stroked its back, feeling a warmth that went beyond words. He had survived the chaos, learned the lessons, and discovered a bond that transcended species. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. Tomorrow would bring more growth. But for now, in the soft glow of the enclosure, Evan Reyes, the human who had accidentally become a parent, felt an extraordinary sense of peace. He was the dad, and the youngling was his kid.